Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So before we get into today's topic, I just wanted to thank everybody who responded to my Q&A a couple of days ago. I have been getting a lot more requests frequently to do another Q&A, but I have noticed that when I do it, I go into very deep detail and then I end up with a two-part video, which I don't really care for. I would want to get it all put into one video. So because of that, I went through all of the questions and then I picked out the questions that I knew that I would go into deep detail about. And so for those questions, I'm gonna make one individual video for each of those. And then for the rest, where I know like there's not gonna be that much explaining needed or advice or tips needed for that one, then I'm gonna just make one Q&A overall for that one. But today's topic is going to be one of the questions that I received, and it's a question that's actually very common, something that I know a lot of people have gone through, also something that I have gone through. So I'm going to just read it off. Please excuse this mark on my neck. I scratch. It looks like a hickey. It's not a hickey, guys. Like, I'm not into hickeys, and I just bruise really easily. And even if I scratch myself, it just leaves a mark. So please excuse the mark throughout the video. All right, so today's question is, how do you deal with letting go of people even though you can't, but you know that you need to? Oh, I'm pretty sure that we have all experienced this or been through a situation like this. And I definitely think it's a topic that a lot of people need to talk about, because we don't really talk about it. I'm pretty sure this topic just comes up when you're with your close friends or even people who haven't really been through it. So I'm gonna give you guys my experience, what I had to go through and what I went through in order to let somebody go. So let's get into today's video. On the topic of letting go, I would say in my life, I have faced two situations with two relationships where, you know, I was faced with this decision. And one example will be me not being able to let go, you know, for certain reasons and having it bite me in the ass in the end. And then the other situation where, you know, I was getting to a point in my life where I needed to grow up, and it was hard, but I had to make the decision to walk away from it. So the first example, or the relationship that I'm going to use, is a relationship that I stayed in for many years of my life, not wanting to walk away because of the fact that, you know, I look back on the relationship and why I stayed so long, and I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, fighting for my family. We had a child together, and then the second reason was because I knew, I don't know, in my brain or in how I function, I always have compassion and I always feel like I can fix a situation. So I saw potential, you know, and I think a lot of us do this with people that we are with, that we really love and care about. You know, I saw potential in the person he was, regardless of everything that he did to me. All the bad he's done, and, you know, even the fact that he never really valued or saw me for who I was either. At the end of the day, every time he would come back and, you know, beg to have his family back, or anytime he would apologize, you know, I believed him. I felt sorry for him, and I knew that at the end of the day, he wasn't a horrible person. Like, he had it in him to want to be a better person, and I feel like that's what made me stick around as long as I did. But I was scared to let go for the two reasons of, you know, we shared a child together, and the fact that I knew that he could be a better person and I wanted to help him do that. I then found out later on that, you know, it kind of bit me in the ass, and we hung on to a relationship that we probably shouldn't have. You know, he had to want the change for himself. It didn't matter how much I wanted it. He needed to want it for himself. So that relationship ended up not working out for personal reasons that I will not list, or the reason why we split, I definitely will not talk on, because I would say only people who know us personally know what went down, and it's not my right or my place to have to talk about what had been done in regards to our breakup. So that's one situation where I wasn't able to let go, and it did end up later on down the road, it ended up biting me in the ass. But the situation that I really, really want to talk about is a situation where I had to walk away and I had to let go, and I didn't want to. That was the last thing that I wanted to do. I'm not gonna lie, it was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. It was probably the first time where I ever in any relationship I've had, put my foot down and told myself, this just isn't working out. I think what made it hard for me was that I was getting, things from this person or out of this relationship that I've never gotten out of any other relationship that I've had. I'm not saying it was perfect. We had, certain times or points where we would argue, but, overall, when I look back on the relationship, it was probably the happiest I've been in a relationship. Overall, it was a good relationship. And I think that's what made it hard for me to walk away from, knowing that we had this connection. We had something special in my, coming from me looking at it. I don't know how he feels on his end, but to me, it was something that was, special, something that I've never experienced in any other relationship. We were able to communicate with one another. We were able to just be ourselves. And I think that is a lot of why it was hard, is that I've never been in a relationship with anybody so far where I was able to just be who I was, or like it was just so easy. We could call each other for anything and talk for hours, and it was just an easy relationship. So I think knowing that I was getting a lot of what I didn't get in previous relationships from this person is what made it so hard to deal with. But there just was one thing, that he had to figure out on his end, that was keeping us from, being together in the long run. So what I had to do with this situation is I had to really reevaluate everything. I had to look at it in a different perspective, because I think looking at it from the perspective I was looking at it in, it was keeping me in this relationship. Seeing all the good things that he was keeping me and making excuses for that one important thing that would affect, our lives in the future. And so I had to really look at the situation and tell myself, is this going to be worth it in the long run? If he isn't making the decision to do what he needs to do right now, then what makes you think that he's going to make it one day? It was always a one day or someday. And I had to look at that, and tell myself, I already came out of a long relationship with somebody where, I thought we were going to be together forever. And do I want to now put myself in another situation with someone where it's an uncertain thing? It's not a guaranteed thing. And I don't think any relationship is guaranteed, but I had to really think about me, and not only me, but my son. So how I dealt with it was that I had to just look at the bigger picture. I had to stop making excuses for the situation that we were in at that time. And I also had to look at my happiness. I was happy when things were going great, which, they were 99% of the time. But it was just that 1% where I was left alone with my thoughts, where I was left alone with the bigger picture of things that made me unhappy. And I don't think any relationship you're going to be 100% happy all the time, but it was something that he needed to figure out. And knowing that he has to figure out something on his end, I had to look at the situation as that's something that he has to deal with. That's something that he has to deal with on his time. And while he's trying to figure this all out, he's doing it on my time as well. I wasn't ready to sacrifice my time while he was trying to figure something out. I had things going on with myself. I needed to get my shit together as well. And so I made the choice because I told myself that, you can say someday, you can say one day, but that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your time or revolve your life around something or a decision that somebody else has to make. And so I had to just kind of stop wasting my time. And I don't think that the time we had together was a waste. That is the last thought that I have. I've learned a lot, out of that relationship, and I'm grateful for everything that I learned from that person, because that person was able to give me hope, a lot of hope, knowing that I am able to have a healthy relationship with somebody one day. And it showed me that, what I was asking for in all of my other previous relationships, it wasn't hard. It was the people that I was with that was making it seem that it was hard, So I know that it's possible to have a healthy relationship. I know that it's possible to get my needs and wants met. And that relationship taught me that. How do I deal with it still to this day? There are days, many days, I think when you have something special with anybody in your life, it could even be a friendship. I think that when you carry out anything special with somebody, that you're always going to care about that person. And I think that's another important thing, with this talk or with this message, is that I had to learn that I can still love this person and I can still care about this person, but it didn't mean that they had to be a part of my life or even on my journey right now. It didn't mean that they had to always be in my life. It didn't mean that they had to always be around. And I think that's where a lot of us get it mixed up. We think to ourselves, I love this person so much. I care about him, so that means that they have to be a part of my life. And that's not true. It's false. You can care about somebody from afar. You don't always have to be in that person's life, and neither do they have to be a part of yours, But there are days, I'm not going to lie, there are days where I look back and I think, we had such a great thing going for us. Why didn't it work out? But I know that at the end of it, just as I've learned in other relationships, that there's always a reason for why things happen the way that they do. There's always a reason for why things turn out the way that they do. And even though I don't understand the reason now, I know that one day, or if I meet somebody else, that there was a reason for it, why that couldn't work out at that time in my life. And I think that's just the bigger understanding of, us having to just let life take its course. I think a lot of us try to, like I say in a lot of my videos, we try to control the situation. And I think the both of us were trying to hang on to something because we knew what we had, but there were things that needed to be figured out. And there were things that had to be worked out that weren't being addressed. And, it was fine. It was fine that had happened, but that only shows that it just wasn't meant to happen at that time in our lives. And I always tell myself, if it was ever meant to happen, then it will work its way out that way. And if it's not, then it happened for a reason. I think the bigger message to all of this is that you kind of just have to know the bigger picture of it. Just because I walked away from this person, it didn't take away how I felt. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to do, because we connect the two. We think that we should stay because we have these feelings for this person. But I had to separate it. I had to tell myself, even though I'm walking away, even though I am stepping away from this situation right now, it didn't take away how I felt. It didn't take away what we had. I walked away making the decision for the both of us, because in all reality, if I hadn't had made that decision, we would have just kept going and doing the same thing. You know, we would have just been living our relationship on this like stagnant standstill, not moving forward, not getting anywhere with anything if we had stayed together. And I think we both would have allowed this to happen if neither one of us walked away. So I walked away and I told myself it's okay. He has to figure it out for himself. That's his life. And if he does figure it out, if he doesn't ever figure it out, then that doesn't fall on me. You know, like that's something that he's going to have to live with the rest of his life. I know how hard it is for anybody to have to make the choice to walk away from a situation. I know that it is not easy. It is a hard decision, especially when that person is like meeting all of your expectations and they're giving you something, but there's just that one thing, you know. And I also had to look at it as, I read this in a book, but I read somebody who was in a similar situation with somebody who, you know, same scenario. They cared about each other. They had something special. And, but in his book, he had something to figure out himself. Or in the book, he had something to figure out on his end. And he would always tell her, you know, one day we'll be together. He would always tell her, you know, one day. And so when she went to go see her therapist would tell her, you know, one day isn't good enough. And that's true, because if you have a list of your wants and needs, you know, and they're meeting every single one of them, but there's just that one, better than my last is still not good enough, because they're still missing that one thing. And, you know, in the book, it explains how, you know, a lot of us compare, right? We will compare relationships and say, well, this relationship is better than my last. And trust me, the relationship that I carried out with this person was 1,000,000 times better than my last. But the one day just wasn't good enough, you know, and it didn't take away from that person. I hold nothing against that person. You know, I understand why they needed to figure out what they had to figure out, but I just had to remove myself out of the situation, because I was getting my life involved in their situation and what they needed to figure out. And I had to step back and say, nope, you're not going to involve yourself in somebody else's situation, somebody else's decision. It's theirs to make on their own, and they're the ones who has to live with it at the end of the day, you know. But it is hard. It's not easy walking away from somebody that you really do truly care about and love. I think just examining the relationship overall instead of just picking all the positives is a big thing. You know, I had to deal with that. I had to look at the fact that, yes, he gave me a lot of what I've asked out of any relationship, but there was one thing, and it wasn't a small thing. It wasn't a small thing that he had to figure out. It was a huge thing that would affect not only his life, but my life as well. So I had to look at the bigger picture of things. I also had to focus on what I could control. I cannot control that he has this huge thing that he needs to figure out. I have no control over that, you know. That's all in his hands. And so you have to step back and say, you have no control over that. They're the ones that has to make the decision. They're the ones that has to figure it out for themselves. And they're the ones who has to live with the choices that they make. But that does not mean that you have to go along the ride with them. That doesn't mean that you have to go along this part of their lives where they're trying to figure it out. And in my case, I gave this person more than enough time to figure out what they had to figure out. And how I look at it, you know, is if this is you in this situation, and there's one thing that's missing or one thing that needs to be figured out, is the fact that they can figure it out on their own time. You don't need to get involved in it. And if it does get figured out later on down the road and it works out, you know, you guys end up getting back together because they were able to get their shit together, then yeah, you know, it was meant to be. But that doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice your life or put your life on hold while somebody else is trying to figure something out for themselves, you know? So I had to focus on what I could control, and that was out of my hands. You are gonna still go through the same grief as any breakup, you know? And I think you feel it a lot more when you're the one who walks away from the situation, because it's not easy, it's hard, especially if it was something that wasn't unhealthy, you know, if it was something that you've always asked for, if it was something that was a great relationship, of course it's going to be harder to walk away. And being the person who walks away, you know, we always deal with the what if, or did I make the right decision. That probably bothered me for, I would say, you know, in the beginning when you walk away, you're like so empowered, and you're thinking to yourself like, yes, of course I made the right decision. But then you're gonna have your days where you're like, oh, but did I make the right decision? I would say that's come up maybe a handful of times with me, but then I always look back to the fact that I'm glad that I did make the decision, because I probably would not be where I'm at growth wise today if I had stayed in that situation. And if it is ever meant to be, then it will be, and if not, then I know that there is something better that will come along my way. I do think that, you know, accepting the situation too is a very, very hard part to walking away from it, you know, having to accept it for what it is. But I think that it's a very critical thing, because if you have to think about walking away from anybody in your life, then you know that there's something within that relationship that isn't working for you. So to me, walking away is always going to be hard. But if you had to look back on the relationship and, you know that there's a part of you that needs to walk away, then you have to just do it and know that you did what was best for you. I think a lot of us get mixed up on, you know, hurting somebody else. But when it comes to your happiness, when it comes to your life, when it comes to the kind of relationship that you want, you have to always think about your happiness too. And that should always come first, is that, you know, somebody can be great, somebody can give you anything you want, and there could just always be that one thing that is keeping you guys from, you know, moving into the direction that you guys should be. And so you have to kind of leave it up to the fact that, you know, that falls on them. That's out of your control. And all you can do is hope for the best. As long as you know that you did your best on your end, then I mean, there should be no regrets. To me, if you look back on the relationship and there was any feeling of you needing to walk away, then that means already at that point that there was something in that relationship that needed to be worked on. And if it wasn't being worked on or acknowledged at that moment or fixed at that moment, then you made the right decision by walking away, by making yourself happy. But anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed me sharing my experiences on how I had to let go and walk away from a situation that I really didn't want to walk away from. But other than that, if you guys are wondering when your guys' question will come up, I will be posting in my story the questions that I will be answering that week. So if you guys don't follow me, then I will put my link over here and you guys can see what questions I answered for that week. But anyways, I will see you guys. Is there a bug on me? Anyways, I will see you guys in my next video, and I hope that you guys have a great weekend. Bye guys.